I don't believe that there was any possibility that this was a hoax. The creature, to both of us, appeared very natural.
In October of 1967, a camera captured just 59 seconds of footage deep inside a remote California forest. For nearly 6 decades, scientists, filmmakers, skeptics, and believers have stared at those same frames, searching for a mistake. A zipper. A mask seam. Anything that could expose the truth. They never found one. Then, in early 2026, an artificial intelligence was asked to examine the footage with tools no human investigator had ever possessed. What it reported would reignite one of the most controversial mysteries in modern history. Because according to the system's analysis, the creature in the film wasn't wearing a costume at all. And if that's true, then something unknown may have been standing in that forest all along. Long before the famous footage existed, the forests of the Pacific Northwest already carried stories of something that wasn't supposed to be there. Among indigenous communities stretching across vast regions of North America, legend spoke of a towering figure that moved through the wilderness beyond human reach. The Salish people referred to it as Sasquatch. Other nations had different names, different languages, different traditions. Yet the descriptions remained remarkably similar. Witnesses spoke of a massive upright being covered in dark hair. A creature far taller than any human. Powerful. Elusive. Always seen briefly before disappearing back into the wilderness. What makes these accounts unusual is that they were rarely told as myths. Many communities described these beings the same way they described bears, wolves, or mountain lions, as living creatures occupying real territory. As European settlers expanded into the region during the 19th century, reports began appearing in newspapers. Loggers, hunters, miners, trappers. Men who spent their lives in remote wilderness claimed they had encountered enormous human-like figures far from civilization. Most stories were dismissed. But they never completely disappeared. Instead, they accumulated. Decade after decade. Until one incident pushed the mystery into the public spotlight. In 1924, a group of gold prospectors working near Mount St. Helens reported a terrifying encounter. According to their account, several massive hairy figures surrounded their cabin during the night. Rocks crashed against the roof for hours. The men believed they were under attack. Whether the story was true or exaggerated, the location became famous. People began calling it Ape Canyon. The name survived. And so did the mystery. Then came the late 1950s. A logging road crew working near Bluff Creek discovered something unusual pressed into the ground. Huge footprints. Human-shaped. But far larger than any normal person's. The impressions appeared repeatedly in the area, attracting local attention. A newspaper columnist covering the story used a nickname that would soon become part of popular culture forever. Bigfoot. The word spread rapidly. And among those captivated by the reports was a man named Roger Patterson. Patterson wasn't a scientist. He wasn't a university researcher. He was a rodeo rider, writer, and independent investigator fascinated by the possibility that an unknown primate might exist in North America. Unlike most people, he didn't simply read the reports and move on. He chased them. He interviewed witnesses. Collected stories. Studied footprint casts. Examined every clue he could find. By 1966, Patterson was so convinced that he even published a book arguing that an undiscovered creature was living in the forests of the Pacific Northwest. Most people ignored him. Others laughed. But Patterson believed the evidence pointed towards something real. And in October 1967, he decided to return to the very place where many of the strange footprint discoveries had occurred. Bluff Creek. He wasn't alone. Traveling with him was Bob Gimlin, an experienced outdoorsman and horseman. Unlike Patterson, Gimlin wasn't deeply invested in proving Bigfoot existed. He came because he trusted his friend. Not because he expected to find anything. Neither man could have imagined what was about to happen. The afternoon of October 20th was calm. The forest stood quiet beneath the fading autumn light. Patterson and Gimlin followed a sandy creek bed winding through the remote wilderness. For days they had searched without success. Nothing unusual. Nothing extraordinary. Just tracks that might have meant something. Or might have meant nothing. As they rode around a bend in the creek, something changed. Their horses stopped. Instantly. At the exact same moment. Both animals became rigid. Alert. Focused on something ahead. For a brief second, neither rider understood why. Then they looked forward. And saw it. Roughly 80 feet away stood a massive figure near a cluster of fallen logs. Not crouching. Not hiding. Standing upright. Watching. At first glance, it seemed impossible. Too large. Too broad. Too strange. Covered in dark reddish-brown hair from head to toe. And already beginning to move away. Slowly. Deliberately. As if it had noticed them long before they noticed it. Neither men had ever seen anything remotely like it. And within seconds, the encounter would become one of the most famous moments in cryptozoological history. But what happened next would create a mystery that no one could fully explain for the next 59 years. For a moment, nobody moved. The forest seemed frozen. Then everything happened at once. Patterson's horse suddenly reared, throwing him hard onto the sandy creek bed below. The impact knocked the breath from his lungs. Pain shot through his body. Most people would have stayed down. Roger Patterson did the opposite. The instant he hit the ground, he scrambled toward his equipment. For years he had dreamed about this moment. Now it was happening. And he wasn't about to let it disappear. He pulled his 16mm camera free and began filming. Meanwhile, Bob Gimlin remained mounted on his horse. His rifle was already in his hands. Not because he wanted to shoot. Because he didn't know what else to do. The figure ahead of them was unlike anything either man had ever encountered. If it turned aggressive, he wanted to be ready. But it never charged. It never threatened them. It simply walked away. And that detail would become one of the most debated aspects of the entire case. The creature moved with a calm confidence that puzzled observers for decades. It wasn't sprinting. It wasn't panicking. It wasn't behaving like something that had just been discovered. Instead, it crossed the clearing with long, powerful strides. Its arms swung naturally. Its shoulders rotated smoothly. Every movement appeared fluid. Controlled. Effortless. Witnesses later estimated its height at around 7 feet. Some believed it weighed over 500 pounds. Yet despite its size, nothing about its movement seemed awkward. The figure covered uneven terrain without stumbling. Without hesitation. Without any visible attempt to perform for the camera. It simply walked. As if it had no reason to fear the humans behind it. Then something happened that transformed the footage from an interesting curiosity into a legendary mystery. The creature turned its head. Just once. Looking back over its shoulder toward Patterson's camera. The glance lasted only a moment. But that single movement created one of the most analyzed frames in documentary history. Researchers would eventually give the creature a nickname. Patty. And that brief look back would become the centerpiece of arguments that continue to this day. Patterson kept filming. The camera rattled in his hands as he moved across the creek bed. Frame after frame captured the figure crossing the clearing. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it reached the tree line. A few steps later, it vanished into the forest. Gone. The film continued running for only a few more seconds. Then it ended. 59 seconds. That was all. 59 seconds that would launch one of the most enduring mysteries ever recorded on camera. After the encounter, Patterson and Gimlin returned to the location where the figure had been standing. There, they discovered something that seemed to support what they had witnessed. Footprints. Large ones. Deeply pressed into the sandy ground. The impressions measured roughly 14 inches long and significantly wider than a normal human foot. What attracted attention wasn't just the size. It was the pressure pattern. Researchers who later examined casts of the tracks argued that the footprints displayed characteristics inconsistent with ordinary human anatomy. Some claimed the impressions suggested a flexible midfoot structure unlike the rigid arch found in humans. Others disagreed. But the debate had officially begun. And once it started, it never stopped. When the footage was released to the public, reactions were immediate. Some viewers were convinced they were seeing evidence of an unknown species. Others believed they were witnessing an elaborate hoax. Scientists, journalists, filmmakers, and amateur investigators rushed to examine every frame. The result wasn't clarity. It was division. Two camps formed almost instantly. And neither side would surrender ground. Believers pointed to the creature's movement. The body mechanics. The apparent muscle structure. The natural way the figure navigated uneven terrain. Some experts in costume design admitted they struggled to explain how a 1960s suit could reproduce certain visual details visible in the footage. Skeptics responded just as forcefully. They argued Patterson had every reason to stage a fake encounter. He needed money. He wanted publicity. And perhaps most suspiciously, he happened to have a movie camera ready at exactly the right moment. To critics, the explanation seemed obvious. The creature was a man in a costume. The case should have ended there. But it didn't. Because proving it turned out to be much harder than anyone expected. Over the decades, countless attempts were made to recreate the famous walk. Researchers hired actors. Costume designers built suits. Television crews produced reenactments. Modern effects artists entered the debate. Yet something strange kept happening. The recreations never looked quite right. Some suits appeared too bulky. Others moved unnaturally. The proportions felt wrong. The arm length didn't match. The gait looked exaggerated. Even when technology improved dramatically, many recreations still failed to capture the same appearance seen in the original film. For believers, that was significant. For skeptics, it changed nothing. The footage had to be fake. The only disagreement was how it had been done. As years turned into decades, one particular frame became the center of attention. Frame 352. The exact moment Patty glanced back toward the camera. Researchers enlarged it. Enhanced it. Studied it under every available method. Some saw facial structure. Others saw evidence of a mask. Everyone agreed on one thing. If the mystery could ever be solved, the answer might be hidden inside that single frame. Yet despite advancements in digital imaging, motion analysis, and computer enhancement, no conclusion satisfied everyone. The argument remained trapped in place. A permanent stalemate. Generation after generation of investigators examined the same footage. And generation after generation reached opposite conclusions. Then, nearly 60 years after the encounter at Bluff Creek, a new investigator entered the case. One that wasn't human. An artificial intelligence system designed to identify patterns invisible to the human eye. And what it would eventually discover inside the famous footage would reignite the debate in a way nobody expected. For nearly 6 decades, the Patterson-Gimlin film existed in a strange state of limbo. Too convincing to disappear. Too controversial to be accepted. Every new study seemed to strengthen one side while creating new questions for the other. Then, in early 2026, a different approach was attempted. Instead of relying on human interpretation, researchers reportedly used an advanced AI system to examine the highest quality digital scan of the footage ever produced. The objective was simple. Ignore the decades of arguments. Ignore the emotions. Ignore the history. Analyze only the evidence. Frame by frame. Pixel by pixel. And see what remained. The first stage focused on movement. If the figure was actually a person wearing a costume, subtle clues should exist somewhere in the walk. Human bodies naturally compensate when carrying extra weight or moving inside restrictive suits. Tiny balance corrections occur at the ankles. The knees adjust. The hips shift. These movements are often impossible to eliminate completely. The AI searched for those patterns. According to the analysis, it failed to find the expected indicators of someone struggling inside a bulky costume. That result alone didn't prove anything extraordinary. But it raised another question. If it wasn't showing common signs associated with a costumed performer, what exactly was producing the movement? The second stage examined body mass and balance. Using the footage, the system estimated how the figure's weight appeared to be distributed while walking across uneven terrain. The calculations reportedly suggested an unusually heavy upper body combined with remarkably stable movement. Again, interpretations varied. Supporters argued this was consistent with a large biological creature. Skeptics countered that estimating mass from old film footage carries enormous uncertainty. Still, the analysis continued. And the questions continued growing. Next came anatomical proportions. The AI measured arm length, leg length, shoulder width, torso dimensions, neck thickness. Then compared those measurements against available databases containing humans and known primate species. The reported outcome surprised many observers. The proportions did not fit neatly into any single category. Too different from a typical human. Yet not an exact match for gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, or other known great apes either. Whether that indicated a genuine anomaly or simply limitations within the footage became another subject of fierce debate. But the most controversial finding was still ahead. Researchers then turned their attention to the creature's hair. For decades, supporters of the film had argued that subtle surface movement suggested underlying muscle activity. Critics dismissed the idea as an illusion created by film grain and image quality. The AI attempted to model how light interacted with the figure during movement. Its analysis suggested that portions of the surface appeared to shift in ways that resembled structures moving beneath the outer layer. To believers, this sounded extraordinary. To skeptics, it sounded like an overinterpretation of limited visual data. Yet once again, the controversy deepened. Because every answer seemed to create a larger mystery. Finally, attention shifted to the frame that had haunted the debate since 1967. Frame 352. The famous over-the-shoulder glance. If a costume existed, many researchers believed the best chance of finding evidence would be here. A seam. A mask edge. A transition between materials. Something. Anything. The AI enlarged the image and examined areas where a costume would most likely reveal itself. The jawline. The cheeks. The hairline. The brow. The neck. The analysis searched for interruptions in texture and surface continuity. According to reports, no obvious seam was identified. No clear mask boundary appeared within the available image data. To supporters of authenticity, that finding was powerful. If a costume existed, where was the evidence? To skeptics, the answer was simple. The footage quality itself was too limited to make definitive conclusions. Absence of evidence was not evidence of absence. And so, once again, both sides walked away believing they had won. What makes the Patterson-Gimlin film so fascinating isn't that it proves Bigfoot exists. It doesn't. And it also doesn't conclusively prove a hoax. That's why the mystery has survived for nearly 60 years. Very few pieces of evidence remain suspended between belief and skepticism for so long. Most mysteries eventually collapse under scrutiny. This one never did. The footage remains. The arguments remain. And somewhere between those two realities lies the reason people still talk about Bluff Creek today. Roger Patterson is gone. Many of the original investigators are gone. Entire generations have passed since that autumn afternoon in 1967. Yet the figure known as Patty continues walking through those 59 seconds of film. One step. Then another. Crossing a clearing that has become one of the most debated locations in modern mystery history. Maybe it was a man in a suit. Maybe it was something science has never documented. Or maybe the truth lies somewhere between those possibilities, hidden inside details that still haven't been fully understood. What we do know is this. On October 20, 1967, something appeared at Bluff Creek. 2 witnesses watched it. A camera recorded it. And nearly 60 years later, the world is still arguing about what walked out of those trees. Because some mysteries fade with time. This one only grows deeper. And somewhere in the vast forests of the Pacific Northwest, the question remains exactly where it began. What did Roger Patterson really film that day?